Alrighty, I think we're up. I think we're good. Welcome, welcome. If you're watching this live, it will be live. If not, it's okay. There's no expectation for you to watch it live. So just know that. Hey, I want to connect with something that was said in the previous video. If you watched the video yesterday, was talking about the dream of Joseph. So in this story, we're talking about how Joseph has a dream, and it says that two of them actually, that his brothers will bow down to him, and that essentially, even though he's this little guy, the youngest on the totem pole at the time, everybody else is going to bow to him. Now that is, that's one of those things that is really interesting because the brothers, first off, they don't like it, and then the story goes where they throw him into the pit, then they sell him into slavery. He goes into Egypt. Eventually, he is elevated, and then his brothers, will bow down to him. So that's an interesting story because that leads us into a very other similar set of words that are given, and they're not given to Joseph though. They're given to Judah. So let me clarify this. When Joseph has the dream, he sees his brothers bowing down to him. There's something that's going to take place at the end of Genesis in chapter 49 where Jacob is going to get everybody together and he's going to start prophesying to his sons about what will take place. And so when he does this, he is starting to tell them what will happen in the future. In fact, let me show you in the text what's going to take place. So I'm going to pick this up and I'll let you guys see. Here we are. So right over here in 49, Jacob is walking through the kind of what's going to take place. Notice what he says, in the days to come. That phrase right there, if it would highlight it right there, days to come, is one that points towards the end of an era, the end of a time. This is looking towards the last days, according to the Jews. And this time frame we're about to see is going to be explained. He's going to tell us what we're looking for in that day to come. So notice what should happen here in these last days. So he brings the brothers around. And so Jacob is about to die. He's going to bless the brothers and tell them what's going to happen in the future. Firstborn, Reuben. Notice he talks to him, says everything about him. He says, you're turbulent. You will not excel because you got into your father's bed. You defiled it when he got in my bed. And, let's face it. In that story, kind of a sick one, he slept with one of his moms. Not his birth mom, but one of the wives of Jacob. So, Jacob had a few wives, and when Reuben was ready, he decided he was going to do that. So he says, you're out, Reuben. You ever wonder why there's all these laws in the Old Testament too? Sometimes because this is what these people were doing. And, no kind of problem with that. So he tosses him out, says, you're not going to do this. Simeon and Levi, your brothers and their knives are vicious weapons. And he said, I don't ever want to enter in their council. I'm not going to join their assembly because they kill men. And on a whim, they hamstring oxen. So these guys are fighters and killers. And of course, he's referencing the story of when they took revenge on an entire town for raping their sister. And so they snuck a fast one on the people and decided to murder everybody in their recovery mode. And Jacob really didn't deal with anybody. He's saying, look, you guys you're hotheads. And so, look, you guys are not going to be the ones that I'm focusing on for the future. Then it gets to Judah. Now, I want you to listen what he's going to say about Judah. And I want you to think about how this compares to the Joseph story. Judah, your brothers will praise you, and your hand will be on the necks of your enemies, and your father's sons will bow down to you. So stop here. In the last days, he's saying, instead of the sons bowing down to Joseph, which they've already have, they're going to bow down to Judah. Okay, well, let's look a little bit more. Judah is a young lion. My son, you return from the kill. He crouches down. He lies down like a lion or a lioness. Who dares to rouse him? You're just talking about the strength that he's got, the power of Judah. The scepter will not depart from Judah, or the staff from between his feet, until he whose right it comes, and the obedience of the peoples belong to him. If you've been around at our church long enough, you know that I love to talk about this passage. This is one of my favorites, because essentially what he's saying is, Judah, you're going to be the royal tribe. You're going to be the leader. Even though Joseph had power in Egypt this time, he's looking past Joseph into the future and saying it's Judah. It's not Judah, but it's a descendant of Judah, right? Because this is in the last days. And so a descendant of Judah is coming. You're going to be the powerful one, right? You are going to be the one who he says that scepter's not going to depart from him, or that staff from between his feet. And then he says this line, until he whose right it comes. Now, some of your old translations, it might say until Shiloh appears. That's untranslated, and what it essentially means is until he whose right it comes. And so the obedience of the peoples belong to him. What he's saying is every king that's come up to this point is a placeholder. You're going to have kings that are going to come from you, Judah, but there's one guy who's coming, and all kingship belongs to him. He is the one to which all will come, and they'll bow down to him. And everyone, not only the brothers, but everyone, because he says the obedience of the people belong to him, meaning the world, the peoples of the world will bow down to this man. Then you find out this. He ties a donkey to a vine, and his colt of his donkey to a choice vine. He washes his clothes in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. And his eyes are darker than wine. His teeth are whiter than milk. And so there's some image of judgment here, of treading out the wine press as well. Now, what's interesting about all of this story is really what it's talking about Judah doing, right? And so you have this idea that in the future, Judah is going to be the one. And this is a messianic passage. This is the passage talking about how Jesus was going to come. Now, they didn't know him as Jesus yet. They just know that somebody's coming. Messiah is going to be coming. And they wouldn't even call him Messiah at this point. Just a man who's coming, who is king, and all kingship belongs to him. We're all just waiting for his arrival. That's what Jacob is saying. This is guy who's coming, and this is the one to everyone will bow down to, not just the brothers. But I do think it's interesting here too, is that, there is some, you'll see what he's going to do. For instance, his hand, verse 8, will be on the necks of their enemies. Remember that passage in Genesis 3 when it talked about the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. I think this is what we're talking about here. He's going to grab the necks, the head of his enemies. But here's the interesting little piece. The question then is, so what's the point of the Joseph narratives? Why do if Judah is the one who is supposed to come, who is going to be the fulfillment of chapter 3 of Genesis, the seed of the woman, why is the Joseph story here? Now, this is something that I got, it's not original to me. I've been reading through the Reading Moses, Seeing Jesus book. Incredible, wonderful book. Can't highly recommend it enough. You can get it on Amazon. And one of the things that they bring up is they talk about how all these stories, and he says, they talk about especially in rabbinic interpretation, they had a phrase, and the phrase was always this, that the deeds of the fathers are assigned to the sons. Meaning all these stories are not just stories just to tell, but they're there to also show that stuff that would happen in the future. So one of the things they bring up, and I think is a really cool, interesting piece, is they ask the question of why. Why is the Joseph narrative in the passage? And to saying that the Joseph narrative is to illustrate what would happen to this individual who's coming in the future. That the Joseph story of this individual who was said to reign, but what's going to happen to him? He's going to be rejected. He's going to suffer. And then ultimately he will triumph in the end. That is to illustrate what would happen to this individual in this passage right here. That this king who's coming, that Joseph passage lends insight into the fact that he will go through the same things. And so I think that's a really cool thing to think about and to kind of walk through. And I know that maybe some of that might be hard to see how that is. Regardless, though, those images we need to connect. The bowing of the brothers, and ultimately how that shifts to there's somebody else who is ultimately coming, who is the bowing everyone will bow to, and it's the King of Kings, who's Every king is just a placeholder until he comes from the tribe of Judah. And we see who that is in the person of Jesus, the descendant of King David. All right. That's all I wanted to say today. I hope that was interesting to you. Wanted to bring that out. But we'll talk next week or next time you look at the next video, if it's already next week, in the future, not in the future of this. Oh, let me just say this really quickly. So in the last days, what are we talking about here? Well, obviously, they're talking about the arrival of the Messiah. Okay, so don't imagine in your mind last days like that. But we're talking about they're looking for them is when Messiah comes. That is that period. Now I'm talking about near future. Next week, we'll talk to you then. Take care. Bye-bye.